Miss Alice. My name is Camille Braxton, and I'm going to be asking you a few questions today. I understand that you've gone through a difficult time, so
Yes.
let's start by talking about some things that I think we can agree on, such as your mental and emotional issues. You have unresolved anger issues, correct?
Yes.
And to keep your anger in check, you take a generic version of Adderall 3 times a day, is that right?
Yes.
But you often refer to these as your good Dakota pills, don't you?
Yes.
And without these pills, you become bad Dakota, don't you?
Yes.
And as bad Dakota, you often do things without thinking them all the way through, is that right?
Yes.
And occasionally, you don't take your pills because you feel more real when you're not on them, is that
Yes.
right? And just to be clear, these pills were prescribed for you by your psychiatrist, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
But even when you're on your medication, you occasionally pretend to be bad Dakota to do crazy things, don't you?
Nothing serious, just things to make them nice.
But you do occasionally pretend to be bad Dakota even when you're on your medication.
Sometimes.
And you follow these episodes by telling the school psychologist that you hadn't taken your pills, even though you had.
Yes.
So you consider these fake bad Dakota episodes to be a sport to you and your friends, don't you?
Yes.
And sometimes you do crazy things just to impress Quinn and the other Invisibles, don't you?
Yes, we do all things together.
But sometimes you do them just to impress Quinn and the Invisibles, right?
Yes.
And speaking of Quinn, she sometimes influences you a little too much, is that right?
She's my best friend.
But sometimes Quinn has too strong of an influence on you, doesn't she?
I guess influences can be a good and bad thing.
But you would agree that Quinn sometimes influences you too much, doesn't she? I'm asking for a simple yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Now let's discuss the case at hand. Detective Sam O'Leary came to your house to speak with you about the fire, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And your father gave Detective O'Leary permission to conduct the interviews, didn't he?
At first, but he didn't know the full extent of what was going to happen.
But your father did provide consent.
Eventually, yes.
And your own father followed his consent by saying, and I quote, "I'm so done dealing with your screw-ups. Just call me if you need a ride home," didn't he?
He did say that.
And you were then taken to the front seat of Detective O'Leary's police car, which did not have a screen between the front and back seats, is that right?
True.
So this wasn't a regular cop car then, was it?
It had a police radio and the light. So, yeah.
But it was not a regular cop car.
Not a regular one, no.
And you were not placed in handcuffs, were you?
No.
And the detectives never tried to take away your cell phone, did they?
No.
So you kept your cell phone on you for the entire day then?
Yes.
And the detectives took both you and Quinn to a fast food restaurant, didn't they?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to talk about your actual confession. You said, and I quote, "I started it. I never meant to kill anyone. I just wanted them to pay attention to me." To Detective O'Leary, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And when your father arrived, you confessed once again by saying, and I quote, "I did it, I did it, I did it. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault." Correct?
Both those times were bad, Dakota.
But you did speak those words, didn't you?
I did speak them.
And it wasn't until after both confessions that you were taken to the police station's jail and placed under arrest, right?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Were you correct?
Yes, Your Honor? Okay. Hello again, Dakota. Can you please tell us why you don't take your meds?
I feel more real on them, and even though I am prescribed them, maybe I don't feel so dependent on them.
Okay. And your physician, they aren't you specifically, right?
Excuse me?
Is your physician you specifically, or are they a separate person?
They are a separate person.
So they can't know what's going on specifically inside your head.
Exactly.
And with Quinn's influence on you, that's not your fault, is it?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, that's a leading question. I can rephrase, Your Honor.
Rephrase, please.
Thank you. Is it your fault that Quinn influences you?
No.
Okay. And so it was mentioned during cross that you were in the front seat. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you eventually end up in the back seat?
Yes, I did. They eventually put Quinn and I in the back seat.
And going back to
zone during that day. What was your comfort zone in that situation? How did you feel?
I was absolutely terrified. It was a terrible day.
And so, going to the point of you're terrified, would that extend to you not using your cell phone?
Yes, I don't know what they would have done. Detective O'Leary kept talking to us like we were a street gang or something. I didn't know I was allowed to use my cell phone.
Okay. And going to your confession, was that after Detective O'Leary pressured you?
Yes, that was after he grabbed my arm and shook me. Yes.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Recross?
Yes, please, Your Honor. May I begin?
Yes.
Miss Allen, just to clarify, your medication was prescribed for you by your psychiatrist, wasn't it?
Yes.
So that's a medical doctor certified to make this diagnosis and this prescription.
Yes.
And you yourself are not a medical doctor, are you?
No, I'm not.
And also, talking about this case at hand, you were only placed in the back seat of the police car after you and Detective O'Leary met up with Detective Jones and Quinn Patel, correct?
Yes.
Further, you did have your cell phone with you all day during that interview, didn't you?
Yes.
And it was never taken away from you at any point.
No.